Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Dixon. I'm a massage therapist and postural alignment therapist in Nantucket Island. I am teaching a class today called Reaching, Carrying, and Lifting, which is functional movement for all ages, but perhaps it might have been better known to how to get up and not injure yourself and move and not injure yourself. It was based a bit, well, it was definitely based on Katie Bowman's book called Dynamic Aging, and I've highly recommended this book. A lot of the stuff that I teach is either through EGOSCU, which is the Postural Alignment Therapist certification that I did, plus also other things that I've learned over the years. Katie's book has a lot of really great information, and it often pertains to people as they're aging, but not necessarily. One thing that is true is if you stop doing certain movements, you stop being able to do certain movements. And I will be the first one to admit that that is true, because as I was getting ready for the class and I was trying some of the things that I used to be able to do no problem, I found myself having challenges doing it. And the more that you actually do them, the easier that it gets. There is a PDF, actually it's not a PDF, it's a Word document, so it had the links in it, that has the links to almost everything that we're going to do, plus the video will be up on the website as well in a little bit. But there was a test that they had done, it was a longevity test, and the longevity test was how well you could get up from the ground indicated what your longevity in life would be. So it's pretty important to be able to get up from the ground. Now, some of it had to do with the fact that that if you had fallen and injured yourself, you had to be able to get up. The other element of this was it showed your overall strength in your hips and your legs and your arms. So there's really two parts, and it was a little bit, they used only certain age groups, so it didn't pertain to everyone per se, but this is one of those movements that you don't want to lose. The other thing is a tremendous number of people that come in with upper body issues for massage will often be that they had lifted and carried something over their head, and that was the impetus of their shoulder injuries. So today we're going to go over a bunch of things on how to move better, and what we're actually going to work on is get moving, do it safely, and it does make a difference. So we're going to start by working on aligning the body from the bottom up. We're going to break down the movements into manageable parts. We're going to build up strength and muscle coordination in the different parts, and then put the parts together and move more. So in spite of the fact that it was about carrying and lifting and reaching, which is what I wrote down a couple weeks ago, we're really going to start with the function of being able to get up from the bottom up. Now, I have talked before in my foot classes where I've talked about how healthy the nerves in the bottom of the feet are very important, and your balance with it was very important in being able to be independent living at home. There is an element where those little nerves are very important with the ability to get up. It's not necessarily the only thing though. There's also about the muscle coordination and the efficiency with it. And that is really what we're going to focus on today. Sometime later this winter, I'm going to be doing a specific class on balance, and it will have foot and balance into it. So today we're really working on the muscle strengths and the movements to be able to do it properly. So when you look at functional movement, there's two parts. There's the being efficient. Can you make the shape and do the exercise? And effective. Can you do it safely? Different people will have different abilities to be able to do it safely, which is why I'm going to show you many ways of doing it. If there's any question about any of these things being unsafe for you, please talk to your doctor. Please take precautions. These are all intended to make it safer and healthier for you, but every one of us is individual. What is interesting is even if you are a 45-year-old, many of you will have trouble making these basic movements. And I even test all of my pretty top athletes that are incredibly in shape, and most of them have trouble making these movements. So it is not just people as they age, but today we're going to start with creating a strong, properly moving lower half without overusing their upper half. People tend to get really dominant in their shoulders. So they tend to do a lot of their activity with their shoulders, and their lower body gets kind of shut off and doesn't work properly. And then we're going to work on centering the body and aligning the arms for the proper reaching, carrying, and lifting. Most people, if you're going to put them just in a general category, if they're lifting and they've got the totally improper posture, that is where the shoulder injuries happen. So with most people, we're going to start with getting up from a chair, which is like a mini squat. So if we're thinking about getting down all the way to the ground and getting all the way back up, that's a big movement, right? So if we're going to break it down into parts, we're going to look at getting up from a chair, which is like a mini squat. And many people use their shoulders and arms to get up, either because they are upper body dominant or they have weaker legs. So people might do it in a couple of different ways. Let me just move my chair back. They might do it with the old heave ho, where they're leaning forward and they're heaving themselves up. Another person might, if they had arms on the chair, they might push down on the chair of the arms to be able to get up. Or people might hold on to something and pull themselves to get up. Or you might shift your weight forward and then get up properly, okay? So in the ideal world, we're going to shift our weight forward and use the muscles on the front of our thighs to be able to get up. Now, why you would want to do this? It is theoretically the healthiest thing for your body, but also a lot of people who depend on using their arms to push themselves up or pull themselves up, then if they get a shoulder injury, they can't get up. So it's really important to be able to use the muscles of our lower body to be able to get ourselves up from chairs. Now, for a person with a bad back, it is especially important to use the correct muscles, because the heave ho and things like this put a lot of pressure on your lower back. So a lot of people, even people who they come in to me with a bad back, right? And bad backs are all different things, but a very inflamed, tight, sore back. And because they've been using the heave ho to get up, it really irritates their back. So we're going to be going over strategies for using the chair, but even for people who are using, who have a sore back, you want to be especially sure that you are not using your back to be able to get up. So I don't know, can you see my feet? Let me go like this. All right. So people with a particularly bad back are going to want to put one foot in front of the other, right? Shift their weight in and then stand up, okay? For most of us, okay, we're going to make sure that we have our knees painted forward, our feet pointed forward, okay? And then we're going to shift our weight into our ankles and feet and stand up using our muscles of our legs. Now, strategies that would help you with this is decrease momentum and move slowly. You want to shift your weight back as you stand, pressing in with your heels, not your toes. So the weight is going to be more in the heel than the toe as you shift in. That's going to help you get into your glutes, okay? And you're going to lean forward with your chest and reach forward with your arms potentially, okay? Doesn't mean that you have to do this. Do what is safe for you, but in the perfect world, if you were using your legs and you're using your glutes, you're not going to be using your arms. If for a period of time you are building up your muscle strength, it is absolutely fine to have something where you have your hand, you have the ability to, as a backup, use these things as you build up the proper alignment and muscles in your legs. And then you want to keep your knees in line with your hips and don't let your knees collapse in or collapse out. In theory, it uses different muscles if we do this, okay? So, and then I talk about a bad back, shift the weight into the legs with one in front of each other, shift in and come up. Now, if you find it hard to get up out of a chair without using your arms, either to push down or to lift up or to heave ho, okay? Different strategies to slowly build up the muscles as you're doing these things is to create a movement practice where it's like mini squats that you do them. Additionally, like this chair is the lowest chair that I would probably use because as you can see, I have like right angles right here, okay? The higher up, like if I was on more of a bar stool and I was up here higher, it wouldn't take as much muscle coordination to make the same move. So a way to build up the strength to be able to get up properly and build up the muscle strength would be to start with a higher chair and create these movements. Now, if these will become very helpful for you overall in overall body strength. It's like a little mini squat. Some of my clients, this is one of the exercises I give them because what do we do all day? We get up, we sit in chairs and we get up out of chairs. Many people dominantly with their upper body, okay? The other thing is if you want to make an actual exercise out of it, I have put a link to an Egoscue exercise, which is called sit to stand. And sit to stand has an element where, let me pull this up a little bit. So sit to stand has an element where we're going to make the elbows come back like this, okay? So now I have an active shoulder. I've gotten a lot of work in my upper back instead of shifting forward like many of us do when we're sitting in a chair, right? I've created an active shoulder and I've taken my shoulders entirely out of the equation. Now I'm going to sit up on my sit bones. I've got a little bit of that arch in my lower back, but for the most part, I'm sitting up and I'm just sort of I'm neutral, but I'm putting some extra extension into my upper back. Then I'm going to shift forward and get up and then get back down. If you need to, make sure that you know where you're sitting back down onto, but you're essentially going to be coming up and coming back down. You want to make sure that your knees are pointing forward, your feet are pointing forward, and you don't go further than the right angles for your legs. If you find it tricky to get up, taking your arms out of it with this active work in your shoulders, start with a higher like bar stool, and then work down to the point where you're getting this. Any questions so far? You know, Amy, would you be able to make me the primary screen? Awesome. Okay. So getting up from a chair is really ideal, but then we have how to get up from the ground. And this was the challenging one that I had because I used to be really good at it. And I've had knee surgery in the last couple of years, but I stopped practicing doing it from the ground. And when you stop doing the movement, you stop being able to do the movement. So I have a link of someone who describes really nicely all the different ways that you can do it. And the perfect way, which is when you have your ankles like this and you're able to get up straight from the ground. I cannot do that one. I have never been able to do that one. So I can't show it to you, but I'm going to show you different ways that you can get up from the ground without using your arms. Now you're going to start using your arms if you can't do it properly, but then in the ideal world, you'd be able to build up the different muscle strength and muscle coordination to be able to get up from the ground without having to use your arms or a chair or something else. But initially, do it safely. Make sure that you have something nearby that you could use, like a chair, if you need to use it to get up. Okay, so let me show you how I can do it. I won't be able to show you the perfect way to do it, but with everyone, they have their own perfect things, right? So for most people, make sure that you might have a chair nearby if you need it, okay? All right, so let me actually move this a little bit. You can see me. So in theory, the statistics of how to get up, it doesn't really matter how you do it. It just matters that you can do it, but make sure you're doing it safely. So there can be a little bit of a heave-ho as well. Just a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to come up. I'm going to have my hands up. I'm shifting onto my knees. Okay. And then I'm going to bring one leg in front of me and I'm going to get up. And they want to equally see that you can get down. So I'm going to do like this. Now I have a harder time on my left because of a knee injury. And as much because of my dog, I'm moving around a little bit. But these are ways that you can get up and get down on the ground without having to use your arms. Now, to start with, if you find it tricky to do this, you might want to have a chair nearby, because if you're getting down to the ground, we want to make sure that you've been able to get up. But the two parts that really show your ability to be independent and safe at home as you age are the ability to be able to get up from the ground if you have fallen. Now, I'm not talking about if you broke your hip, but just if you have fallen, you can get up, back up from the ground. Any questions about getting up from the ground? I've added an element of a weighted one. So if you can get up from the ground safely, that is the most important thing to do. And you will be using all different muscles and the muscle coordination to be able to do that. There are people in the functional movement world who have created whole exercises that then add weight into it. So weight would be something that you might potentially add once you're very good at what you're doing. And you know that it's safe for you to be able to do so. The exercise that is really about getting up in the proper movement, separated up, is the Turkish Get Up. And there is a couple different versions that I have attached into. Now, I was surprised at the level of difficulty I had just a couple days ago with the muscle coordination, and particularly on my left side in getting up. And this was just from a couple of months of not making a regular movement practice of it. So I am not quite ready to add weight into my exercise routine in that movement because I'm not yet coordinated enough. But it has really brought to my attention that when you stop doing these movements, you stop being able to do these movements. So I have now been working just for the last couple of days on improving getting up, and it's improving quickly. So the more that you do use these things, the better that it goes. Any questions so far? Okay. Carrying. The key to carrying properly is creating a centered thoracic area. Now, almost everyone that comes in, well, let me put it this way. A lot of people will come in with a shoulder that inflamed up because they were traveling and they were either dragging suitcases, and especially as they went to put a suitcase in an upper compartment of an airplane. Okay, so it's the lifting of a weight over your head, and it's probably not the best of circumstances, and people are usually a little bit stressed when they're traveling too, okay? It is tricky to have weight over your head, but the important part of having that stacked arm and then not injuring yourself is to be able to have the shoulder making movements when it's in the proper alignment. So the proper alignment would have an element of our feet are straight. So if our feet were out like this, okay, we're going to have an element where now my feet are going to be generally placed forward. And if you think about the center of my hips right here, you can see that the center of my feet are relatively with the center of my hips right here, okay? Now my weight is going to be in through my heels or in through my ankle bone. So this is also going to talk about where the center of gravity around my pelvis is. So my center of gravity is either going to go forward and now it's more over my midfoot and forefoot, or I'm going to shift my weight back and now you can see I can lift up my toes and I've got my weight into my heels or my ankles, okay? My weight is going to be centered between my right and left legs. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but now I'm going to shift a little bit to my left, which is this side. And now I'm going to shift a little bit to my right, okay? So what I really want is that my center of gravity, my center of my weight is right sort of through the middle, okay? They talk about centering of the pelvis, but by the time you have your weight back into your heels and you have the weight centered between the left and the right and you have your feet generally forward, you're mostly going to be centering the pelvis. And then they talk about centering the rib cage. I want to show one thing though that you can see. So you can place the feet right and you can place everything in the proper alignment, but there's still ability for rotation here. So if you even look at my knees, right, you can see that my knees are a little bit knock-kneed when I do this, okay? So that usually indicates that I need to build up some of the strength in my hips that are going to keep me a little bit more stable, okay? Lots of ways that we can do that, but one thing that I want to make sure, okay, is that how knock-kneed I'm going to be. And sometimes with different exercises, I might even, this one's a little big, but I might even say do some squats where I'm going to put something between my knees, because if I was to potentially do a squat and my knees were going to be collapsing in, this is going to keep me in better alignment as I'm doing that, okay? And the more that I build up the proper strength into my hips, I'm less likely to do that, okay? And then centering of the rib cage. So the reality is if my pelvis is forward, okay, now, actually, let me try sitting. Okay, so my rib cage is ideally going to be stacked right on top of my upper body, okay? But my rib cage might be more forward and it might be more back, depending, okay? So, for example, if I'm standing here, I gotta lift this up a little bit so you guys can see. If I'm going to stand here, okay, and my center of gravity of my weight shifts forward, do you see how to balance myself, my upper back has now shifted back. So now I have an element of a sway back, or my back isn't really loaded over my front. Or if I really had shifted this way far back and now my body is shifting forward, you can also see that my thoracic area isn't really stabilized over my bottom. So the reality is we want our pelvis to be where it's supposed to be, and this is going to really help the bottom of the body. And then we also want this thoracic area built up over here. And then we want to make sure that our shoulders are in the correct position. And then we add weight and lifting on top of that. One of the reasons why this is important, and Katie talks a lot about this, but I wasn't going to talk a lot about it today, is that in our thoracic area, we have a lot of, we have different diaphragms. So we have these closed areas that have organs in them. And depending on if the weight is shifted more towards the front or towards the back, it changes the amount of pressure in these closed areas. So we have the closed areas of the pelvic floor, which has the diaphragm on the bottom. Well, we have the diaphragm on the top, literally, and a diaphragm on the bottom, which is the pelvic floor. Okay, and then we also have other areas in front of it. So depending on if the weight is shifted more forward or more back, it will change the overall pressure inside our body. So the perfect world is going to have everything stacked up properly. People will have fewer pelvic floor issues when they're able to do this, and people will be able to breathe more ideally because we will have better space for proper breathing. Any questions so far? Okay, so let me see what I had listed. Okay, so the different ways. Okay, so one of Katie's favorite things, and I meant to bring 2 pumpkins down. So when we talk about carrying, we really want to be able to have a relatively stacked body. And I had forgotten to bring down the 2 pumpkins to show. But in theory, when we're starting to carry things, okay, so now we have the stacked body, but we're not really used to carrying things. When we're getting used to carrying things, we might want to start with things sort of in the center and being able to be still supported on top of these things, arms relatively neutral, holding something that is going to be, you know, relatively able to be held. Now, a lot of our weight is being held in the legs. We're going to lift, okay? I didn't actually put this in the thing, but we're going to lift as much as possible, okay, with our upper body in this stable position, and we're gonna squat down, pick up what we need, and use our legs to get ourselves up, okay? A lot of people will lean over and lift up using their back. And this can go on for a really long time until you injure your back sometime. And then you're gonna really wish that you had learned to stack up the body properly, squat down, and pick up things a little bit differently. The other thing is the muscle use. So you will, if you squat down to pick something up, hold it closer to your body and squat back up, you actually get better muscle coordination. It's very similar to when you're able to walk and you're really getting into your glutes to push yourself forward, that you do you get much better cardio workout out of it. Advanced carrying will add an element where even though maybe you have, you know, squatted to pick something up, you might have multiple things and you change where it's changing your center of gravity. So say I had 2 pumpkins, okay? And I have 1 pumpkin in this hand right here, and then I have the other one here, and they're different sizes. Now it's challenging my body and my core in a different way as I'm walking around with this, the weight shifted, not just in the center of my body, but now I've challenged by having the weight shifted in a couple of different areas. Any questions about carrying? Okay, reaching. This is where a lot of people end up having issues. And I have to say, if you have one of those funky shoulders that really gets very unhappy when you lift weight overhead, I would just caution about respecting that. Now, I feel like everyone can improve by by aligning the body properly and adding a small amount of weight into it, but just respect your own body. Not everyone is going to make massive changes. Not everyone does the basic work to be able to do things safely. And the number one thing is that we're improving our functional movement, but we're doing it safely. There are a bunch of different exercises that are going to help create an ideal shoulder position over the centered thoracic area. So our centered thoracic area is going to have, starts with our pelvis being in the correct position, and then each of the other areas are in the correct position, and then our shoulders are placed properly and stable. So they're going to be relatively, for most of us, feeling like their shoulders are squeezed back, but really in the perfect world, they would naturally fall here. I spend hours a day leaning forward, working in this position. So it is not necessarily easy for me to get my arms way back here. So for me, it's important that I work on this, because the reality is I push all day long. I don't pull very much. And I spend all day pushing like this, as opposed to getting my arms back. But different exercises that could help create a centered rib cage around a shoulder joint, and they are in the PDF. Well, it's not a PDF, the Word document that I sent. There's links to each of these. Some of them are Katie Bowman's ones, and some of them are Agoski ones. But I'm going to show you these really quick. So floor angels. Floor angels, I'm going to show you, is a Katie Bowman one, but I'll show you another one that you can do with a foam roller. So floor angels and arm glides are very similar. They're all an element, really, where we're looking to get our shoulder blades back, our chest open, and then the ability to glide our arms up and down. And this is a scapula movement. Once I get my arms in the right position, it's a scapula movement where that chicken wing bone right here is able to move like this and then up and down, okay? So floor angels, arm glides, and I'll show you something on a foam roller, will all be ways that we're going to open up this chest, get the back to extend a little bit, and also work on being able to have the proper movement. And there's links to all of these. Okay, I'm gonna move my chair out of the way. Just need to make sure that you can see me, so I might pull this down a little bit. Okay, so they use a bolster for arm angels. You could use a pillow, no problem. And I might be short of space, so I'm gonna just have my knees bent for this. But I'm going to place the bolster in my upper back, so my head is resting on it, okay? And now I'm looking to be able to rest my arms off to the side. And right now, I'm a little bit tight, so I'm not actually getting to the ground. As you can see, I am sort of floating here. In the perfect world, with an arm glide, this is going to be able to stretch open, and then I'm going to be able to make like a snow angel to be able to get that arm movement a little bit better. Arm glides, we can take away that pillow. Now I'm on the ground. I'm going to get the arms to the ground. Now, if your arms stick up like this, okay, that you have trouble getting the arms to come all the way down like this, okay, this is where a small amount of a pillow, not quite as big as this guy, will make a difference, okay, in that upper body. But I'm able to get my arm all the way down, and then I'm able to slide up and down. And this is that scapula movement. For me, my issue is a little bit more my upper back versus the scapula. My scapula is pretty mobile.
Okay, if you have trouble, if you go and you're lying down here and your arms go like this, no problem, but then you come here and you lose that ability to be able to relax, or you get your hands down, but now your elbow is lifted up like this. Can you guys see that? You might want to work on different things that are going to extend that upper back and get that shoulder a little bit moving. Later on, there's elbow curls, but elbow curls that sort of look like this. This is actively working that shoulder. You might have an element where you are doing the arm press-ins like this, and you only go as far as you're able to not arch your back. So you would work on having elements here, and or you can work in here. Lots of different ways to be able to get the different shoulder movement that you need. One nice thing about doing it on the ground is that you have a straight surface to be able to do it to. And then it's a great way to practice being able to get up. If you have trouble getting up, you can do all of these exercises standing against the wall as well. It also gives you an opportunity to get up. Okay, so the doorway, so wall stretch. I actually put in counter stretch for your links, but they're about the same thing. With any of these exercises, this one is going to stretch my entire back line. So if I think about the front line's entirely the front, and then the back line is entirely the back, this is going to be about the back line, okay? So I'm going to come over, I'm going to put my hands either on a wall, or I could do it on a counter, okay? My feet are going to be pointing forwards, about hip width apart. I'm going to put my hands on a wall, okay? And now I'm going to take my butt and I'm going to stick it back, and I'm going to sink as far as I can with straight elbows where I feel a stretch. Now, there's two elements that are happening here. I am stretching my entire back line. I am also looking to sink my upper body between my shoulders, which is going to give me a stretch into my shoulders, into sort of the pecs a little bit. And I'm also working on extending the back. So one important thing that I want to do is maintain just that little bit of an anterior flexion into my hip. What it might look like is if my back was arching like this, that's not what I want to do. I want to maintain that I have that little bit of an anterior tilt, and then I'm going to come in here and sink as much as I can maintain that proper posture, okay? Now, depending if I was on a counter, okay, let's say it was a little bit lower, and we were on a counter, okay, I might come here and I'm gonna go like this, and I'm not gonna get as far down with my shoulders. Now, a stretch, I'm getting a great stretch in my back line, but I'm not getting nearly as much in my upper body as I was when I was on the wall, because I come this far, and that's as far as my back line will allow me to go properly. So I can't really sink in further. When I come up on the wall, I have more space that I'm now stretching my back line the same way, but I'm getting a little bit more stretch into my upper shoulders. Another stretch that can be very helpful is the pec stretch. So a pec stretch is I'm coming here, let's see. All right, so I have a wall right here, okay? I have my arm against the wall, and I'm looking to stretch. I'll show you what this looks like in a second. But I am, say this is a wall, okay? I'm going to take, and I'm going to stretch my pecs like this. So I'm standing typically, and I'm going to feel a little bit of a stretch, and I'm opening up my chest like this, okay? If I was standing and I had my arm up a little higher, and I'm stretching like this, I'm going to get more of my pec minor, okay? And then if you have a doorway And you can kind of stretch up in the doorway and hang a little bit and feel a little bit of a stretch in here. That's really great for opening up the shoulders as well. I've forgotten to show you what it looks like to open up some of these same things on a foam roller. So let me do that next. So I've got a softer foam roller, which is typically my preference. I'm going to have this on the ground. I'm going to carefully get down on the ground. I'm going to place my tailbone right at the very end so that my body fits on the foam roller. I'm a little bit unequal here, okay? And now my core is able to activate a little bit. My back is able to just relax on the foam roller. Right now I have a little bit of an arch in my back, but within a minute, my back is probably going to relax down because the foam roller is a few inches high, okay? Not only am I having to kind of activate my core a little bit to keep from falling from one side or the other, but as I rest my arms off to the side, it's allowing for an opening into the chest, which is going to stretch my chest a little bit, okay? So it's typically not going to work so well to be able to do like arm glides in here, but this can be a really great way to be able to have the back relax, engage slightly into the core, and stretch out the pecs. This is like exactly opposite of what we do all day long as we sit slumped over in our chairs, okay? More advanced things, once you're very used to and comfortable with this, okay, is to be able to do some pelvic tilts when you're on this. So I'm very gently, I'm using my muscles of it's my pelvis, but I'm using my hip flexors and my back muscles. So I'm using my hip flexors to pull and create a little bit of an arch. And then I'm using my, a little bit of my legs, but then my back to flatten. I'm not going excessive, and I'm letting the rest of my body move along with it passively. But the only activity is coming from right here, and I'm flattening and creating an arch. And this is, so I'm somewhat balancing, and I'm playing with the muscles of my lower back to be able to get those a little bit better. Even more advanced, and you can place your arms to create more stability, is to add elements of engage into your core, lift the leg up. So to create the stability, okay, I do have my elbows down on the ground. I'm feeling into my core. I'm going to create some stability of my core and then create a march. Okay. The last shoulder exercise that I wanted to show you, which I had, well, no, I'm going to correct the head position in a second, but elbow curls. So for an example of how you can do all of the exercises that I just had up against a wall, if getting down to the ground is either too challenging for you or not practical, because any of these things are only good if you're actually going to do it, right? So if getting all the way down to the ground and finding the time to do it is too challenging, I'd like to just suggest do what you can when you can. If you happen to be somewhere and you have a wall, practice with a wall. If you're going by a doorway and you have a doorway that you can stretch in, spend that minute to stretch. If you're not finding yourself finding the time to do these things, make the time when you're already doing something else. So you could do things against the ground, or you could come up against a wall, okay? So now I'm up against a wall and I can do the arm glides, the elbow curls, active hand, and I'm going to bring the elbows forward and I'm going to bring the elbows back. Most people will have trouble with one or the other of these, okay? But almost all of these exercises can be done against the flat wall. And you can just do them standing up. The one thing about doing them against a wall is you can tell if you're level. You know, you might be doing it you know, sort of like this, and you don't realize that your pelvis wasn't shifted properly, okay? With anything, as you improve your alignment of your body stacked on top of each other, it's ideal to be able to create stability into that area. And one of the best ways to create stability on top of things that are properly stacked is proper diaphragmatic breathing. And this is a really basic, really simple thing to do, but it's one of the very best things that we can do. I have whole classes where I've talked about diaphragmatic breathing, okay? But in the perfect world, okay, we've now improved our body. We've now become more stacked. I am going to bring my chair in because one of my favorite ways at the end of the day to create this proper body is, so all day long, we're sitting, we're kind of hunched over, right? We're flexed, everything is sort of flexed in like this, and our heads are forward, okay? At the end of the day, I can reverse some of this by getting into a static back. Now this is like sitting, but I'm allowing my body weight and gravity to be able to reverse this, okay? So now I'm sitting, okay? My hip flexors are out of it. All of the flexion that I had all day, gravity and the ground are pushing me backwards, okay? And I can do all of my exercises in this position as well, okay? If I wanted to do it, and then I'm gonna focus, now that my body is stacked up properly, which is the proper position, I can work on diaphragmatic breathing, which is breathing into your abdominal cavity. But again, we're going to breathe down into our belly. We're going to breathe out to our sides. And we would relatively breathe out our back, though, because we're lying on our back, it's not going to get into our back as well. Okay. The ideal breathing is also going to be in and out the nose with the tongue on the roof of the mouth, the teeth apart, the lips together softly, and a long inhale and a longer exhale. And that is a really great way to stimulate. You had the proper stacking, and then you're going to have the proper breathing on top of it. Other classes this winter will go a lot more into balance, into better breathing, into getting into the emotion, the limbic system, which is a very high system of the body that kicks in at different times. But to be able to stack the body properly and then to breathe really helps set the proper positions better. Any questions so far?
Rachel?
Yes.
In the getting down without using your arms and then getting back up without using your arms, the getting down, I'm pretty good except for the last 5 inches.
Yeah. Thank you. That is a really good thing. So here's the thing. First of all, do start with having that hand nearby, okay? But the other thing is, if you have trouble except for the last 5 inches, first of all, have a softer surface, okay? Second of all, go down onto a pillow. I should have showed you guys this too. Same as when I talked about getting up and down a chair where, like, if the chair was too low, go to a higher chair, okay? If you are practicing getting up and down from the ground and you have trouble in one section, start by using a pillow. So start by having a pillow and getting up and down using that pillow, okay? Or a bolster. So I'm using a bolster right here, but we're going to, but we're using this bolster because it changes the angle of the hips a little bit, okay? In the video link that I had of the person who was getting up and down, she was able to sit like this, okay? And hook her ankles and pull herself up without using her arms, okay? I can't do that, but she shows you that you could do it straight from the ground, but you could also do it up from this pillow. So it is helpful to be able to potentially use props to be able to get you started on the way as you build up it's because you're building up not only muscle strength, you're building up muscle coordination, which is a little bit trickier for people. When we do rolling patterns, next week, I'm gonna go over some rolling patterns, I think, as we look about driving more safely, but really it's also about being able to turn properly. And so there's all sorts of different ways that we can use props to get us started on the way, because the test really is the exercise to get us doing it, really. So use whatever props you need to do it, and also have your hand nearby, you know, and then over time, as you build up both the muscle coordination and the muscle strength, it's going to be a little bit easier. The other thing is to break things down into parts, okay? So if I just take the way that I did it, and there's multiple ways, you don't have to do it the way that I do it, is to break it down into the parts. Like getting up and down a chair is like a mini squat broken down into parts, okay? So say I'm able to be on my knees and my knees are healthy enough to be able to do this, right? I'm gonna come here, and this is one movement where you come into hip flexion, into hip extension. And maybe I'm gonna practice this one for today, okay? And then I'm gonna practice coming up into hip flexion and simply bringing one leg forward. And now I'm balancing. And now I'm going to come back down, and I'm gonna come into hip flexion, and then I'm gonna come here, okay? And so now I'm working on this movement. And then I'm going to come, and I'm gonna come all the way up. So now I've come here, and now I'm gonna work here. And then I'm gonna come back down and come here. Okay, so there's all these different pieces, and particularly where you find that you're missing a little piece. Now, with a lot of people, okay, there's different ways that they have. I mean, some people have that you come up like this, and then you shift, and you come up like this. I mean, there's lots of different ways. I find that I kind of heave myself up, and I come here, and I'm rocking to get myself up. And what I found actually the other day when I had trouble doing this was I was having a little bit of left knee problems. And this was the part that I had trouble. I couldn't use this side to get myself up. So I practiced this for a bunch. And when you're really out of shape like me, this actually makes you sweaty. It gives you some cardio.
Yeah.
So I'm practicing just getting up this one part. Now I might practice this one. And actually you can even add weights to it. You know, this is, if I was up on to like bricks, I could actually use a weight to create like a dumbbell, or if I wanted to. I wouldn't necessarily start with weights, because there's two things that we're doing. We're creating the muscle coordination. This is like how your brain and your muscles respond and react. Then we're going to build up strength to be able to do it, okay? So first you want to work on the muscle coordination, then you want to add the strength. But you could add some weights here. So now I'm getting a little bit more cardio with it. And then we're going to come here, and then we're going to come here, and you can go back down. So there's, but definitely, because you're looking to create the muscle coordination and then the strength to do it, whatever props are going to make you successful, and then lessening the props is ideal. It's the same way where if you were lying back, there's one more thing I had to show you, but so if you're lying back and you have a really thoracic tight shoulder, okay, or upper back, and or a really propped forward head, okay, when you go to lie back against the ground, okay, right here, I have, can you see me? Yeah, okay. My head is ideally aligned. If I was really rounded up here, I might be so rounded that to get my head back, now my head is looking this way, okay? Can you see how my chin is more pointed to the ground and my eyes are more right here. In the perfect world, I might end up having a pillow back here so that my body is stacked up properly and my head and neck are in proper alignment. And then I'm going to work on getting my head in better alignment. And as my head gets in better alignment, I can reduce the amount of pillow because now my head can come back and be in proper alignment with the rest of my body. Katie Bowman talks about, she doesn't talk about neck nods. She talks about, she essentially talks about neck tucks, right? Neck tucks are a little controversial, but since I was using a lot of Katie's stuff, let me show you what they were. The controversy of the neck nods, the neck, what does she call it? The neck tucks, are that a lot of people have this forward body, right? And we're like, oh, our head isn't in the correct position. So we're going to take our chin and we're going to tuck it. And suddenly we're going to be more stacked up properly. I can't even see if I'm doing this correctly. Okay. But what I've actually done is if I've corrected my upper body, my head has actually gone way far back because I was trying to make the correction at my neck when the correction should have been lower. Okay. So neck nods can be helpful, or not neck nods. Neck nods are a different thing. Neck tucks can be helpful to some people. They can sometimes overuse the joint right here at your occiput. And they can, but really make sure if you were going to do that, to make sure that your body was stacked properly to start with. Yes, okay. We only have a couple minutes left. Any questions?
I have a comment.
Yes.
I've attended enough of your sessions that when I have a pain in my back or whatever, I hear your voice saying, "Are you stacked properly?"
Yes.
And then most of the time it goes away just by stacking properly. So
that's excellent. The other thing is almost everyone that calls me and they're like, I'm in intense discomfort. Okay. In order for me to be able to make a difference, they kind of have to get out of intense discomfort and allow me to be able to like actively work on them. So I will almost have everyone do a static back, which is to lie down with your legs up on, a thing and allow gravity to reduce stuff and then diaphragmatically breathe, right? So we're stacking up the body properly. We've gotten the hips out of it. The hips can be a slightly complex thing. We've taken the hips out of it. We've stacked the body. The head has come back. You're sitting up, but you're not sitting up with gravity pressing down on your discs. And then we're diaphragmatically breathing. Almost everyone feels better when they do that. Almost everyone. Actually, everyone has. No one has ever come back and said, oh, that made me feel worse. It hasn't corrected everything for everyone, but almost everyone feels better. So.
Well, these aren't really severe pains, but it's enough that's irritating. And I think, wait a minute. And I hear you say, are you stacked properly?
Excellent. I'm so glad.